Woodland Scenics use coal to make most of their rock moulds. Unfortunately, I don't have access to any coal at the moment, but I do have access to the great outdoors. I'm sure we'll be able to find a rock out here that we can use for our casting. Let's go and have a look. Well, I didn't have to walk very far. I've managed to find a pretty good looking rock that'll work well. It's a little bit too big to move on its own, so that's why I brought the trusty old hammer and the chisel, and I'll see if I can break off a few pieces that I'll be able to take home with me. These rocks I'm chipping away at are sedimentary rocks. They're usually quite soft and easy to break, which makes them perfect for making rock moulds. Now that we've got a pretty good sample of rocks that we can use for our castings, let's get this back to the workbench. Now that we're back, let's get our rock ready to apply the latex rubber and make the mould.
First off, we'll need a brush, a cup of water to clean the brush, some non-stick baking paper, and most importantly, we'll need some Woodland Scenics Latex Rubber. The rock has a lot of loose material on it, so before we coat it with latex rubber, I thoroughly clean the rock using the dry brush. The non-stick baking paper is there to ensure the latex doesn't accidentally get on the workbench or cutting mat. The first layer only needs to be thin. The most important thing, especially on this first layer, is that you get good complete coverage and get into all the cracks and crevices. I find using a stippling motion with the brush helps the latex get up into the tight spots. Once this first layer is on, you can simply wash the brush in water, as the latex rubber is water soluble, which makes cleanup very easy. According to the label, the latex needs about 30 minutes to dry. I found in my case it took closer to 2 hours to dry, however it was quite cold and damp where I was, and I ended up taking the mould inside and sitting it in front of the heater, which made a big difference in drying time. It's recommended to apply a minimum of 3 layers when making the mould, and for stronger moulds, just apply more layers. I put a total of 5 layers on this mould. The second layer was again quite thin, however the third, fourth and fifth layers were much thicker and subsequently took much longer to dry. For additional strength, you can also use gauze bandage and apply it to the mould between the fourth and fifth layers to give added strength. So far, I've found my moulds hold up quite well with just 5 layers of latex rubber. Once it's completely dry, you're ready to release the mould. Depending on how much detail was in the rock will determine how easy it is to peel the mould away. This rock had simple detail, but it had a few areas that were recessed with slight overhang, so I had to use a bit of force to get the mould to release. Just be careful that you don't tear the mould. You might also find that small pieces of stone get stuck to the mould as you start peeling it away. These are easily removed once the mould is free. Cleanup is easy enough once all the pieces of loose rock are removed. I use some soapy water and a brush to remove any dust and stubborn bits of dirt. Once it's clean, you have a brand new mould ready for some plaster. Due to the uneven shape of the mould, I fill a small container with sand, and that way I'll be able to press the mould into the sand and it will prevent it from rolling as the plaster is being poured and whilst it dries. For this mould I'm using hydrocal. However, standard plaster of Paris works just as well. Just be sure to make quite a thin mixture, something similar to the consistency of a chocolate thick shake from McDonald's, or strawberry if that's what you prefer. Next, I pre-wet the mould with some water that has a drop of dish soap in it. It doesn't need much soap, and now I'm ready to pour the plaster. To help the plaster get right into the cracks, I give the bench a good thumping. This does two things. It helps the plaster fill all the small gaps, and it also brings any bubbles in the plaster to the top. And now it's just a matter of letting it dry. I usually wait about 4 or 5 hours before removing the mould. It should peel away quite easily, but just be sure to go easy to avoid damaging any of the fine detail on the surface. And remember to give the mould a wash and dry once you're done. That way you'll find your mould will last a very long time. The last step for our rock is painting. There are literally 100 ways to paint rocks. In this example, I'll show you the easiest and fastest way that I know that gives lots of colour control with very few steps. First, you need to choose a good base colour for your rock. I find darker base colours work best. Here I'm using mud brown with some black wash mixed in, and I further dilute that with water to make a thinner wash. Next, just simply stipple the wash over the entire rock and leave it to dry. And finally, I just use plain white and dry brush the erased surfaces of the rock, starting very light and adding more if I need to. It's always easier to add more paint, but very difficult to remove paint if you make a mistake. And that's it. If you're putting your rocks on your layout, you'll probably find it easier to install the rock and blend it into the surrounding scenery on the layout before painting them. I hope you enjoyed that short tutorial on making your own rock molds using Woodland Scenics Latex Rubber. I hope you too have fun making your own molds. Don't forget to check out bouldercreekrailroad.com, and if you'd like to support these videos, you can check out my Patreon page. Cheers and thanks for watching.